So we are about to be joined by, as I say, people from all over the UK and Uganda and so on. Richard, are they with us now? Yes, I can see.
Yes.
Thank you. Great. Can we all give them a wave from Bristol? Welcome all of you. Welcome all of you. It's Hilary Saunders, who is here on my right, who organised this event and is wonderful and is from Redland Meeting along with myself. I'm Jo Flanagan from Redland Meeting in Bristol, and on my left we are incredibly lucky to have Sue Miller, who honestly every time I talk to her she's just back from having talked to world leaders and so on and so on. So Sue Miller is a lawyer and she is the head of global networks for the Stop Ecocide International campaign. So she's going to be here to talk about that and how it's going, how the campaign's going. And this afternoon is about us raising any disquiet, any things that we're not sure about, particularly about Quakers supporting this, and also looking at ways that we can take the lead as Quakers. Welcome, welcome. And I'd like to just hand over to Sue Miller, who will be talking about the campaign.
Well, good afternoon, everybody, and thank you for inviting me here to talk about ecocide and the growing movement to establish it as an international crime. The staggering fact is that it's not a crime already. People that hear that can't quite believe that there is no law against serious damage to the environment. So what drew me to ecocide was an article by the journalist George Monbiot in 2019. He wrote it about the founder of our movement, Polly Higgins. Polly Higgins was a barrister, and at the end of a big case that she had won in London, she had a very successful practice, she was looking out of the window and her thought was, actually, it's really the earth that needs a really good lawyer. And long story short, she gave up her practice and devoted what remained of her life to researching and activating the most effective way to protect the earth. Her research led her to the International Criminal Court and to Ecocide Law, and she set up Stop Ecocide in 2017 with Jojo Mehta. Now, I wasn't the only person to read that article and to realise that an international ecocide law would be a really powerful protection for the planet. A lot of people read it and came forward, like me, to offer their support. And I think it's fair to say that Polly's death acted as a sort of springboard which turned the campaign into the rapidly growing movement that it is today. And that's her legacy. And now we have groups in 47 countries who are all working hard to influence, persuade and encourage their governments to support creation of an international ecocide law. Making ecocide an international crime would have given a gravity and a weight to existing environmental legislation. That's legislation that to date has proved weak and unequal to the task of protecting our environment. Ecocide would have reached into the boardrooms of the world where most of the decisions behind the destruction are made, and it would have changed the decision-making process. The laws and regulations that do exist are either too weak or they're not enforced. Any company that does find itself being brought to account for environmental damage can simply pay a fine, or perhaps after a civil suit pay some civil damages, or maybe even a bribe to make it go away. And then it will just carry on business as usual. The penalties are monetary, so they can just go into the balance sheet as a business expense. Making ecocide an international crime changes all that. It creates personal liability for the key decision makers behind those destructive acts. No director wants to be branded an international criminal. No corporation wants an international criminal prosecution to damage its reputation or its share value. And insurers won't insure projects that have the potential to be ecocidal. With an ecocide law in place, it's almost certain that corporations will go about their business in a completely different way. They'll invest their time, their energy, their funding, and their talent into developing new and more sustainable ways of achieving results. The truth of the matter is, ecocide happens because it's not illegal. So how can we make it illegal? Well, in the simplest terms, by amending the Rome Statute to include ecocide. Ecocide means unlawful or wanton acts committed with knowledge that there is a substantial likelihood of severe and either widespread or long-term damage to the environment being caused by those acts. Now, within that definition, wanton means with reckless disregard for damage which would be clearly excessive in relation to the social and economic benefits anticipated. Severe means damage which involves very serious adverse changes, disruption or harm to any element of the environment, including grave impacts on human life or natural, cultural or economic resources. Widespread means damage which extends beyond a limited geographical area, crosses state boundaries, or is suffered by an entire ecosystem or species or a large number of human beings. And long-term means damage which is irreversible or which cannot be redressed through natural recovery within a reasonable period of time. Environment means the Earth, its biosphere, cryosphere, lithosphere, hydrosphere, and atmosphere, as well as outer space. So it covers a great deal of ground, as you might say. Unlike genocide, the definition doesn't require an element of intent. The reason for that is most environmental damage is not caused intentionally. It's just collateral damage, and it's a careless side effect. The definition was launched in 2021, and since then, 37 countries are on public record as having had a parliamentary or government discussion about ecocide law. Now, Stop Ecocide is not a state, so we don't ourselves have a voice at the ICC. Our job is to drive the conversation forward and to support those states who are taking it forward at the ICC and making the running. So far as the UK is concerned, the government has so far been unwilling to engage with ecocide law, but we've had strong indications that a future Labour government would support it. So the conversation is developing and support is growing internationally. But despite all this sort of activity at national level and multinational level, our ultimate goal is to enshrine ecocide law at the international level, at the International Criminal Court. And this is the measure that will ultimately throw a safety blanket around the earth. There's a lot happening at civil society level, and I think I've got another session a bit later on, and hopefully I can tell you about, we can discuss what we and other organisations are doing in this space, and perhaps make some suggestions about how Quakers can help in that movement.
Hilary Saunders, to my right, is now going to talk about what's actually happening as emissions rise, carbon bombs and so on. So, Hilary, over to you.
Okay. As Quakers, we believe in taking responsibility for our actions. So we all need to do what we can to reduce our carbon footprint. But when our planet is on fire and global emissions are still rising, we need to discern the truth urgently. Who or what is responsible for this situation, and how can we stop the destruction? We all need to reach our own conclusions, but here is some evidence you might like to consider. We know nature is being devastated by deforestation, mining, industrial farming, etc. But the relentless rise in emissions means that we have to look at the fossil fuel companies. So what do we know about them? In 2017, the carbon majors data showed that 100 fossil fuel producers are linked to 71% of greenhouse gas emissions since 1988. That gives you some perspective. In May 2022, The Guardian did a landmark investigation into carbon bombs. They looked at the development plans of fossil fuel companies and identified 195 new carbon bombs. These are projects which will each result in at least 1 billion tonnes of CO2 emissions over their lifetime, enough to trigger catastrophic climate breakdown. Meanwhile, despite all the dire warnings, our Prime Minister has offered huge tax breaks to companies investing in new oil and gas fields in the North Sea. He intends to issue more than 100 new drilling licenses, and the UK and other governments are continuing to subsidise the fossil fuel companies. Why are they behaving like this? Obviously, the fossil fuel companies are immensely rich, but there is something else which gives them even more power, and that's the Energy Charter Treaty. This treaty aims to protect the investments of fossil fuel companies who set up production plants abroad. It enables multinational fossil fuel companies to sue countries for massive compensation if their future profits are adversely affected by any government decision. The European Parliament has voted to leave the Energy Charter Treaty because they recognise that it is blocking action on climate change, and the European Commission is now calling for EU countries to have a coordinated withdrawal. But the UK still supports the Energy Charter Treaty. Can anything be done about this legally? There's actually a lot of action brewing in the courts at present. More than 20 cities and states have filed lawsuits against big oil companies seeking damages for the destruction caused by climate disasters. For example, New York City is suing ExxonMobil, Shell, BP, and the American Petroleum Institute for violating New York's consumer protection law through false advertising and deceptive trade practices. Children and young people, as Sue mentioned, are trying to use the law to uphold their human rights. 6 young people from Portugal have filed the first climate change lawsuit at the European Court of Human Rights. They're suing 33 European countries, including the UK, arguing that they haven't done enough to prevent climate change from affecting their right to life. But winning a human rights case doesn't always secure the necessary action, especially when governments like our own want to reduce our human rights. All of these lawsuits are a response to environmental destruction that has already occurred. We do not have a law to stop the damage from occurring in the first place. What we need to protect nature from very powerful corporations is the strongest law, and that is criminal law. And that's why we need to make ecocide a crime in international law.
I just wanted to draw Quakers and others' attention to the fact that on the Quaker website, Faith for Ecocide Law, which will go out in the notes, you can see this video, and also you can see mentioned, can I borrow your book, Sue? You can see this book, which is Faith Voices for Ecocide Law. which is a little book, and it's just full of gems, and it's from faith leaders, Indigenous leaders, and so on, from around the world. In essence, the chapters, the uniting theme in this lovely book is that we're all part of nature. It's not separate, we are nature. And the problem partly is being that we have seen ourselves as separate from nature. And ecocide is destroying our home. It's all our homes. I want to end with just one wonderful quote from the book, which is, I used to think the top global environmental problems were biodiversity loss, ecosystem collapse, and climate change. I thought that with 30 years of good science, we could address these problems, but I was wrong. The top environmental problems are selfishness, greed, and apathy. And to deal with these, we need a spiritual and cultural transformation. And we scientists don't know how to do that. We as Quakers could take a lead in this. We have a very important role, and that's why we're all here today. And thank you for being part of that. 6 Quaker area meetings, including Bristol area meeting, have already signed up for supporting the Stop Ecocide International campaign, and that is something that I would love all of you people who have joined us from different area meetings to urge your own area meetings to do so likewise. In a minute, going to be looking at ways, just discussing in small breakout rooms, the sort of things that we could do as Quakers that could make a difference. Where can Quakers be different, and where, bear in mind we are our planet, we are running out of time, where could we make the difference to push this ecocide law quicker? And I was thinking, would it be great if Quakers used our wonderful way of working in multi-faith ways and used our contacts within the UN and so on to work with faith leaders from around the world, which represent billions of humans, to get an open, published, signed letter of all the faith leaders of the world supporting, calling for an ecocide law. That's just one idea I had, but I'm sure you'll have other ideas yourselves.
Civil society's contribution is incredibly important to give that lift to all the diplomatic efforts that are happening. And there's a lot happening, there's plenty of opportunity to get involved. Our objective is to make everybody familiar with the word ecocide, for them to understand what it means, to normalise and socialise the concept, and for people to be astounded that it isn't yet illegal. And they invariably are. So if ecocide law is something that chimes with you, please talk about it. If conversations turn to things environmental, bring it up. Use the word, explain the concept. There are lots of resources on the website, stopecocide.earth, which you can use. There are slideshows, talks, there are posters. There's a digital toolkit available, which you have to ask for, but if you ask for it, we'll be happy to send it out. So there's lots you can do on a personal level.
But what I would love you to do is to email Hilary Saunders here, who organised this. You will all have her email address. If you as individual Quakers or others, or at area meetings level, would like to do something to support the Stop Ecocide campaign, please just email Hilary with all your ideas and she'll compile those when she sends the video and the notes from today from Sue and so on. I just want to say thank you so much for all of you for joining us, and here in Bristol as well. I genuinely think that Quakers can be a really good force for change. Thank you all for joining us, and I think we'll just give you all a big wave, and we'll see you again another time. Bye. Thank you all.